expectancy with other countries. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, who's coming later, and I'm sure you'll respond to me, on 19th of January in a press conference, says, Budget 2023 confirms that the government is clueless, incompetent, uncaring, and anti-poor. Goes on to say that the budget confirms that the government is more interested in serving its business colonies than in living the quality of the life of Guyanese people. He goes on to point out that PPP will not eliminate poverty, will not ensure that families can live comfortable and happy lives. And then on the eve of the budget opening, the debate, on Monday, January the 16th, there's another press statement that comes out from the office of the PNC statement that says, Guyana has, for instance, and I'm quoting Mr. Speaker, one of the highest rates of poverty and inequality, infant mortality, maternal mortality, suicide, child malnutrition, and preventable deaths. Our country has one of the lowest levels of life expectancy, numeracy and literacy, education performance, and access to quality health care. These indicators are not abstract statistics. Mr. Speaker, I have presented you with statistics. The problem again with the opposition, it is just verbiage supported by nothing. It is sitting on quicksand. You cannot, because everything we're looking at data-wise, we have a long way to go. We're a small developing country. But we are making progress. And this is under the PPC because you took us back in the 5 years. You took hundreds and thousands of dollars from each family with all those taxation that you brought on our people and VAT for essential food items. And yet you come here sanctimoniously and pretend that you did a good job. Mr. Speaker, in access to finance, Guyana records near equal rights with women. And in terms of inheritance rights, women and daughters and widows in the report have equal rights. Mr. Speaker, again, more statistics. Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC does not comprehend this forward and progressive movement of our people. In fact, as I said, they cannot comprehend it. It's unfathomable to them, while at the same time each of their MPs benefit from the measures the government has introduced, as they should. The people like the budget members. Our people like the budget measures. They understand these will bring benefits to their lives. And they want more, and they will. That is normal, and they will get more. But that they understand that the country is progressing. Just look around you, man. As I said, you come to the house with tainted glasses. You need new glasses. Maybe you should join Mr. Frank Anthony's eye care program and get your sight corrected. Because street lights are going up where they weren't any. Roads are going up where they weren't any. Bridges are going up where they weren't. Houses are going up. Just if you want to have an aerial view of the housing program, take a flight from Ogle and fly over Cummings Lodge and Industry. This is where you see progress. This is where, Mr. Speaker, our people will always want more. And we will produce, and we will give them as they deserve. But, Mr. Speaker, they know now, in 2023, that things are better and far, far, far better than under the APNU AFC. One member on the other side said the government had its boot on the necks of the people. Government, us. This was a Freudian slip, Mr. Speaker. It was the APNU AFC boot that was on the neck of the Guyanese people, that with 200 taxes took out $200,000 out of the pockets of each family, that scrapped the cash care program and took billions of dollars over their term of office out of the pockets of school children in our country. The country is alive. And the APNU AFC boot has been taken off the neck of the Guyanese people. Our people can breathe again, and they want to grasp the opportunities that are available to them. Mr. Speaker, The APNU FC MPs came to this house and talked about friends and families and cronies. And my colleague Vikram showed how all of Guyanese are friends and families and new friends. But whilst the APNU FC MPs desperately, in much of their presentation, was defending their record of government, they could not answer. If they had done all the things they claimed to have done, how come the Guyanese people rejected them at the electorate? How come they weren't brought back into government? Mr. Speaker, that's something they need to go and have a cathartic moment in their parties. Mr. Speaker, they calculatedly omitted to tell the House that their government had the highest level of executive lawlessness in the history of our nation, with consistent violations of the Constitution over the entire term of office, which escalated after the non-confidence motion and the 2020 elections, where the head of the OS Observer Mission, former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, reported to the OS Permanent Council in July 2020 that, quote, that he had never witnessed such a transparent effort to steal an election, unquote. The audit reports of 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 are filled with case after case of breaches of the Procurement Act and financial regulations during the APNU time. The PPC report on the new Denmark Harbour Bridge exposed the collusion of a minister and the entire cabinet to cancel a tender with over 20 foreign and local companies and give it the contract to a company that never bid and continued after the exposure, after the report of the BBC, to continue to pay that company an additional $126 million from the Denmark Harbour Bridge Board. Seriously, you come here and try to play holier than thou? You come here trying to pretend that you're pure? Mr. Speaker, while I was in opposition, I probably had some more time than I may have now, but I compiled a list of scandals up to 2019, 57 scandals, Mr. Speaker. Please notice scandals with procurement, with executive lawlessness, with cronyism, and paying companies for money when they hadn't produced the work, etc., and paying their financiers. And regrettably, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of persons in this House who are involved in these things then, and some are before the courts. So let me leave that as it is. You know who you are, and we know who you are. Mr. Speaker, the April 2020, the Auditor General report did a special report which was tabled in the House called COVID-19 Pandemic Assistance Voucher Program. That was tabled in this House, and it deals with the period of April 2020 when COVID came along, and that what efforts the government supposedly did to bring relief to our people. I wish to remind you that you had to go and register at the Burnham Institute in, what's it called, that place, Kwame? Opposite Cultural Center, which was the former president's home, which he donated as the Burnham Institute. People had to apply there for the vouchers. What did the audit report find? Number one, people, and I'm reading, Mr. Speaker, I'm reading, quoting, page, italics 3. This is in the executive summary. People who needed assistance were denied. Over 9,000 of the 11,000 qualified applicants did not receive vouchers. Mr. Speaker, out of 9,000 out of 11,000 never got the money. And officials have not explained why. The program excluded persons in the hinterland regions. Instead, they promised hampers. Number two, payments worth millions were not verified. Vouchers totaling 56 million were not checked before paying suppliers. This weakness could have resulted in overpayment to suppliers and eligible persons not given much needed relief. Three, vouchers not used were left unsecured. Over 3,000 unused vouchers valued at least $90 million were unsecured on a desk. On a desk. As a result, the vouchers could have been easy access and used to obtain supplies. And it goes on to talk about the weak information data system to track and to keep records of what happened. This, of course, I'm sure will become an issue of the PAC. Mr. Speaker, what is clear, Mr. Speaker, they said repeatedly in this House that they came in and there was no money. Again, intellectual bankruptcy. Because we left, and all the Bank of Guyana and all the reports show that $780 million of foreign currency reserves were left in May 2015. And by 2020, August, it was down to around 200 million US dollars. Where the money gone? What did you do with it? You don't trouble your reserves. You're very careful with your foreign currency reserves. In fact, you're supposed to have at least, you try to keep at least 3 months reserves in stock for a rainy day. Mr. Speaker, the other area that preserves us, helps us to have a rainy day and to save and to hold on to money. There's the gold reserve scandal, Mr. Speaker. I see someone writing all the time in the paper as part of the gold board. Sanctimonious as usual. But there's a gold reserve scandal. These are our assets of the people, our savings for a rainy day. We left 13 billion Ghana dollars worth of gold reserves. And Mr. Speaker, by 2020, it was less than 200 million Ghana dollars. And you know what it is? You know what they did? They took the money, the gold, and they sold it when the gold price was lowest on the world market. Lowest on the world market. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the height of incompetence, the height of irresponsible leadership. You took the two pillars that we have in case of instability, in case of exogenous factors that you can fall back on, and they exploited it. They squandered it with very little of a trail left. Mr. Speaker, the procurement laws, in contrast, Mr. Speaker, in contrast, the procurement laws have been upheld and the constitutional oversight bodies, the Audit Office of Guyana and the PPC are functioning. The judiciary is functioning. The Parliament office is functioning. The legislators are a different issue. The APNU AFC claim they got there with this race card that Indo-Guyanese are getting contracts.
But Honorable Minister, I have to play the time card. You need an extension.
Mr. Speaker, I ask the honorable member be granted a 5 minutes extension.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Minister, you have 5 minutes to conclude.
They talk about Indo-Guyanese getting contracts and pointing to this apartheid that they like to refer to. But Mr. Speaker, I have a question. I sit in cabinet, I see contracts coming out. How am I to know that a company name ABC and JW and NNS or ABC? How do I know the ethnicity of a company? How does one deal with the ethnicity of a company? I mean, this opportunism, bankruptcy, intellectual opportunism is so offensive. So offensive. As far as I'm concerned, and if you go to the thousands of small contracts at the local government level, regional and ministerial tender boards, contracts are given to all ethnic groups of a right to bid and be considered, and if responsive, they get the contract. Mr. Speaker, they make fun and make light of the increase on the threshold from 75 to 85. But this will bring for all taxpayers by the relief of deducting $85,000 for those of you who earn more than $85,000, over $1 million in relief in taxation. Mr. Speaker, They say there's nothing in the budget. And I can predict that when Mr. Norton gets up, the quotes I gave from the press statements will be the line he carries. Nothing there. Nothing to deal with poverty. Nothing to deal with this. The race card will be pulled out, and the cronies will be pulled out. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, they lack any comprehension of how the economy works and the budget's measures bring relief. I ask the honorable members to look at an excellent article in the Mirror newspaper by Dr. Leslie Ramsamy on the budget and the measures that affect the Guyanese people. And you will hear our luminaries coming afterwards, particularly my dear friend, Dr. Ashney, who will tell you how the measures, we are giving billions of dollars into the pockets of people. Unlike what you did, you took money out of people's pockets. We are putting money back in. And we've done it in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and for the next 20 years when we stay in government. Mr. Speaker, hope and optimism. Why don't they get it? 600 companies have been registered with the local content secretariat. 1,000 small contractors have been encouraged and assisted to get registered and bid for small contracts across the country. Each of these small contractors, 1,000 of them, hire at least 5 people. Creates jobs. 1,200 small grants, according to my colleague, Minister Waldron, received from small business in 2022. 40% increase than before. The Amerindian village councils, no matter what Mr. Henry says, are being given contracts to build roads and infrastructure in communities. And Warramadon has a contract, the same region where Upper Maz, where the honorable member comes from, to build a new primary school. And they're doing it. Mr. Speaker, everywhere you go, there's change. The architecture is changing. The landscape of each village, each area, each part of this country is changing rapidly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the level of race and racial innuendos was sickening in this debate. Deliberately putting one area of the country and one ethnic group against each other is reprehensible. They cast empty barrels around, dropping laced comments about discrimination, but they refused to bring one single case of such. Mr. Speaker, the people know you better than you know yourselves. They know you better than you know yourselves because they've experienced you from 1964 to 1992. They've experienced you from 15 to 2020. But they also experienced you in 2011 when you got the 1 seat more and we were in government. They saw you cut $90 billion out of the budget for the Amerindia Development Fund, for airstrips, for salaries for public servants. They saw all of that. So I repeat, the people know you better than you know yourselves. Mr. Speaker, this is a visible, accessible, accountable, communicative government to all Guyanese. We are based on a policy of inclusivity and participation. And we brought in new initiatives, such as Men of Mission, for example, to fight domestic violence. Why aren't you standing with us? This is not, as Priya Manik-Chan said, a political issue. Presidential Youth Advisory Council to involve young people across this country in learning to take on leadership and solve issues. The National Resource Fund, which has been congratulated by the IMF as we amended it in last year to allow for participant oversight. The Leader of the Opposition has to name his person in one committee. I'm not afraid that he's done that yet. The 2 names came from the parliamentary committee as required. But Mr. Speaker, the one thing is that this issue of our oil revenue comes here. And we never touched the money. Never touched the money until that act was brought back and passed in this House in 2022. You don't think it might have been tempting? If it was in your hands, you would have gone with it already. But Mr. Speaker, I predict, I can know. Mr. Speaker, I'm not a Farsi. As they say in Creole, I'm not a Farsi. Not meaning Farsi, meaning I can see in the future. But I do say today, when the Leader of the Opposition speaks, and I'm followed by Mrs. Hughes and Mrs. Valder Lawrence, that we will continue to hear the 3 witches turning the cauldron. We will hear the 3 witches stirring the cauldron, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable Member, Ms. Catherine Hughes. Honorable Member, at 11:53, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is ironic how life is, because for the in this parliament and in the previous parliament, in the long wee hours of the morning, I have seen a red-headed witch flying through the chambers. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by giving a warm welcome to Letitia from the Black Panther movies. And I say to her, welcome, welcome to beautiful Guyana. Mr. Speaker, once again, I am here to address this honorable House on another budget. This time, our 2023 national budget, improving lives, building prosperity for tomorrow. And Mr. Speaker, I am fortunate to have heard this morning at 5 to 9, the Honorable Bobby on his 104 program, who reminded us, ignore loud and aggressive persons, for they are a vexation to the spirit. And therefore, the honorable member that has an inferiority complex when it comes to me, I feel sorry for you. I know the challenges of size, and I expect you to behave the way you do. I want to ask the Honorable President to make sure that the Most Honorable Kwame McCoy is part of that mission of men that we support. Mr. Speaker, let me start by recognizing that the preparation of any national budget, especially one of this size, is no easy task. I recognize the long hours of work undertaken by the staff of the Ministry of Finance and you, Honorable Minister Ashley Singh. And most importantly, the families of staff members who have endured many hours of their loved ones working overtime to fashion this budget. To all of them, I say thank you. As I stand here to address this august house in my British accent, thank God I am proud of the strong Guyanese education that taught me to speak properly, all right here in Guyana. I would like to think that my immediate response to that comment about a British accent would be to just laugh in the face of such pettiness at this critical juncture in our history. But I can't because it hurts me to think that in this day and age, we are still quibbling over a distraction so as not to address the real issues. One might also assume that I do not appreciate the efforts that have been made to put together this budget, that maybe for the first time in our history has behind it the resources to provide for our people in ways that we could never have thought of before. I do appreciate the effort, though woeful it is, but my overriding response is a deep disappointment that this opportunity to really give our country and our people what they've waited so long for is an opportunity lost. I cannot but weep for my people, the people of Guyana, who would hope that they would see more in this budget a true understanding of any government, the need to put their people first, to see that the benefits gained from the oil boom could create real-time transformation in people's lives. I had earnestly hoped that this budget would showcase a change of thinking on the part of the PPPC, that they would see what could be done with the resources we now have available, and that they would have the moral inclination to do so. Alas, all to no avail. In addition to the lack of understanding of the needs of the Guyanese population that has been highlighted in this budget presentation, is the willingness to defend its inaccuracies with a state of inaccuracies and, in some cases, outright lies that are mind-boggling, to say the least. Our aim as elective representatives of our people is to ensure that we provide the means for every last one of them to live full lives, to have access to quality health care, education, the means to earn a living, provide for them a dignified old age, and to use the country's resources towards that purpose. So, on behalf of my people, the people of Guyana, the questions I must ask are these. How does this budget contribute to better lives for our people? How does it improve education and healthcare? How does it allow our people to have the resources to live comfortably? How does it add dignity to the lives of the elderly? Mr. Speaker, this budget has the responsibility to articulate a vision for Guyana, and this is what we're not seeing. What will the country look like in 5 years, in 10 years? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, a real vision cannot be found amongst the collection of large infrastructure projects thrown together. Mr. Speaker, there are few truths that I hope we all can agree on in this room, regardless of the hostilities, the vitriol, the lack of respect, and downright verbal abuse hurled especially to us women in this honorable house. The first truth is that regardless of which side of the house we sit, any government in office in Guyana from now on will be able to have money to spend on the medium and long term. The gods have given us that gift, and we are thankful. The question is, how do we prioritize the welfare of all our citizens, our children, our pensioners, those with special needs? And how does this budget treat these groups? This must be our number one consideration. Mr. Speaker, this budget is set at $781.9 billion. The first budget to benefit from $31.3 billion from the sale of credit carbons, along the transfer of $2.8 billion from the National Resource Fund. Real GDP grew by 25.1%. The US dollar has been relatively stable over the last 2 years and even before. All good, Mr. Speaker. All good, Mr. Junior Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as I am fair in my assessment of the positive nature of these indicators, I want to give credit where it's due. A failing highlighted during these budgets. Mr. Speaker, no matter how you cut it, our nation would be sitting in a totally different place had the APNU AFC coalition not pushed the development of our oil and gas industry, as any good government was expected to. What is sad, Mr. Speaker, is the minister's constant tirade that he collected a damaged economy. Mr. Speaker, at this point in time, I want to remind us all how this economy was ticking as far back as 2018. The
Honorable member, just give me 1 minute. Member, Mr. McCoy, Honorable Minister, you're in my right ear. I can't help but hear you. So if you could tone down what you want to say and be a bit more effective in it. I'm just getting now overly annoyed with the shouting from you. You get back your time, honorable member. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I wanted to remind the junior minister of how strong our economy was in 2015. And these are the words of the International Monetary Fund. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be sharing all these documents with the Parliament. And this is what it says. Ghana's economic growth strengthened in 2018 with broad-based expansion across all major sectors. Real GDP growth grew by 4.1%. And then it goes on to say, production, which was largely financed by direct foreign investments, petroleum sector, public finance, improved in 28 as the central government deficit came in at 3.5% of GDP, lower than the budgeted 5.4, and it goes on. Economic growth increased. The medium-term prospects are very favorable as oil production is on schedule to begin in early 2020. We started in 2019. And there's the director saying that the management of Ghana's oil wealth and the emphasis they need to complement it. They are commended that the National Resource Fund framework aims to save some of the resources. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to spend more time, but to say there was no bankrupt economy in 2018. So, Mr. Speaker, and this is where I want to say that, since assuming office, I want to quote page 1 by the Honorable Minister, who I see had to get up and leave, and that's okay. I know how that feels. Since assuming office, our government set about the task of repairing the deep and lasting damage caused by 5 years of misrule and mismanagement. Now, what's good is that he introduced to this parliament the term intellectual dishonesty. And it's interesting that the minister himself is a victim of his own intellectual dishonesty. So, Mr. Speaker, the shouts that nothing was done have been resounding. But as I said, the facts are here on the emergence of Guyana's oil and gas industry, which the APNO AFC so carefully charted so that all Guyanese could reap the benefits. And in terms, we know that the road to first oil 2015 to 2019, I want to mention some of the things that we achieved in those 4 short years with less money to spend and restrictions on spending money. We strengthened the GGMC, GRA, EPA, signed a new agreement, a production license, established the EITI, established a Department of Energy, and even created the very first GIPEX oil conference. A big oil conference. We keep hearing that it's the first time. We did it in 2018. 650 persons paid to come. And that was when we were in government. We signed bilateral partnerships, MOUs for training, and got support from the World Bank, IDB, IMF, the Chatham House, the Royal Institute, the Oxford University. It goes on. Tons of work was done, Mr. Speaker, by hard-working, committed Guyanese. It's time we give credit where it's due. Mr. Speaker, I note that in 2016, our inflation rate was 1.4, 2017, 1.5, 2018, 1.6, 2019, 0.1, by the same government that supposedly mismanaged the economy. Today, it's a whopping 7.2% and rising as the food cost highlights. Prudent management of the inflation rate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we look at Appendix 6 in the budget, of course, it talks about our public debt. And I don't want to list all the figures because of time, but I just want to say in 2018, it was 1.79 billion, and by this year, we expect it to be 4.4 billion. Mr. Speaker, the minister states on page 26, since returning to office, we invested over 10 billion in plant and equipment. This year, sugar gets over 4 billion. And yet, Mr. Speaker, when the coalition was in power and so-called mismanaged the industry, in 2019, 92,282 tons of sugar was produced. And in 2022, under the excellent management of Mr. Singh, the PPPC could barely produce 47,000 tons. This does not make a lot of business sense, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to repeat the pain our citizens are experiencing with the high cost of living. We've heard the present cost of items in the basic bread basket of goods. And I'm asking, is this really the best we could do? This fastest growing economy in the world, one of them. The best we could do, Mr. Speaker, is to give the pensioners $5,000 increase. Mr. Speaker, allow me to directly show. Good quality depends. A bill for $4,000. And I know Depends can be bought cheaper in Guyana. But it was a pensioner that said to me, Miss Cathy, we buy this one because it lasts a little longer. So your $5,000 increase would be spent on 18 Depends. And maybe we could throw in a bottle of Ensure for the pensioners. Is that the best we can do? Mr. Singh, Honorable Minister Ashley Singh, you and this PPP government have given the pensioners nothing really. And that's why we had recommended 50%, 50,000. Our persons with special needs, whom the Minister of Education boasts we're going to do more for, which is good. They get an increase of $2,000. Really, Mr. Speaker? That is actually 2 taxi drops, assuming you're living in Georgetown. If you're living anywhere near Herstelling, it would be 2,000 or 2,500, depending on the time of day. Mr. Speaker, there has been much debate about the future of education, and I am strong and I support the programs that are going to improve the ability to give a higher quality education to our students. But Mr. Speaker, we have been told, but we have to ask, how come with a budget of over 700 billion, we have to wait until 2025 for the students, the university students, to get a little something? Mr. Speaker, could we give them a 50% reduction in the fees? Get creative, work together, maybe arrange a 25% rebate, something to help the students in these difficult times. How can we justify putting $4 billion into sports? And I'm a strong supporter of sports. How can we support and justify $4 billion in sports and a little over $3 billion for the University of Guyana, the premier institution where we and the private sector expect our qualified Guyanese students to come out of from, especially given the local content requirements. 5 of the 8 faculties at UG are science-based. Within the Faculty of Social Sciences, there are 12 different disciplines. How do you justify gold scholarship programs, getting about half of UG's budget with no physical infrastructure of that size to work with? Mr. Speaker, politics should never intrude on our educational capabilities. The Learning Channel, quite possibly, is the most important mass education tool for the primary and secondary education process, education in Guyana, and it must be commended. But this entity has been unable to reach its full potential because it continues to be constrained by nepotism and limited thinking. Why should someone who is related to the sitting Minister of Education be running that facility with no broadcast experience and no education background. These are the issues that continue to plague us, and these are the issues that have to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, we could have used the opportunity of these debates to discuss these issues. Mr. Speaker, how is it possible that the APNU AFC coalition, at a time when there were no oil reserves, was able to make permanent salary increases in wages and salaries for teachers, nurses, doctors, the defense services, police, and security forces? It moved from 39,570 in 2015, and again, I don't want to spend time on that, but it moved from just over 39,000 to 70,000 by 2019, a 77% increase. Mr. Speaker, I want Guyanese to understand what I'm saying. I'm making a distinction between putting and increasing your minimum salary and as opposed to one-off cash grants. I want Guyanese to understand that if you were receiving a minimum wage of 39,570 in 2015, and you then started to get, by 2019, 70,000, it means you were getting an extra 30,430 every month before tax. Imagine by the end of the year, you would have received approximately, roughly, don't knock me down for it, $365,000 extra. Now do you understand, Guyanese, how small that 35,000 one-off cash grant really is? We recommended taking the minimum wage to 100,000. Don't the poorest Guyanese have rent or a mortgage, family, electricity, and all those costs to pay? Mr. Speaker, what is of great concern, which is reflected in this budget, is the government's propensity to provide cash grants instead of increasing wages and salary. And what exactly is a cash grant? I want everybody to understand we're in support of cash grants, but it must be a top up. Because guess what? You can't take a cash grant to a bank. You can't use a cash grant that is unpredictable and subjected to the whims and the fancies of this government to give it to you. You can do very little long term with it. So these are the fundamental problems. Mr. Speaker, on the tourism development front, I want to say that what is important, what we have to look at long term with regards to our long term plans for economic development is that information must be driven by data, right? All of us in this house, including the private sector, must be given the opportunity to interrogate that data. Mr. Speaker, I asked the question to the Honorable Minister of Tourism. What is the data that we can use that supports the decision to place a much anticipated hospitality training school 6 hours away from the geographical area of our new hotels? All the new hotels are going to be on the coast. And yet, we're asking that investor to work out residential accommodation for his staff to be able to go to the hospitality school, which we know is an important institution. I worked and did studies on that also. So why would you give a potential investor that burden when we know they want to ensure that their staff can go on with on-the-job training? And that's why I say to this honorable house, why not an urban area, is a totally unacceptable answer. Bring the data, Mrs. Minister. It's the same kind of thinking and lack of data that allowed us to create a synthetic track in a location where our data does not show the majority of our athletes do not come from, and the athletes that can use it have to take 2 buses each way. Mr. Speaker, I want to note that when it comes to some sectors, reductions have been huge. Gold is a classic example, where the earnings were 876.6 million by 2022, but had fallen to 80.30 million. Mr. Speaker, sadly, one of the problems we've had in this debate, these debates, has been the gross inaccuracy deliberately voiced and spurted out here. And one of those is that of the Guyana Forestry Commission. We heard the Junior Minister of Finance, the Minister of Agriculture, and others speak of the APNU AFC bankrupting the Forestry Commission. Mr. Speaker, again, nothing could be further from the truth. The report of the forensic audit and review of the Guyana Forestry Commission, dated December 31st, 2015, by Anand Gulsaran on page 8, informs us of a totally different position. And I quote, during the period 2006 to 2010, the Commission made payments to other state agencies totaling 1.28 billion out of its retained earnings. Of this amount, 2 payments totaling 600 million were made to NISIL to meet the cost of the 2007 World Cup, to assist in the construction of the Marriott, and another 600 million transferred to the governor of the Bank of Guyana as the liquidator for the Colonial Life Insurance, CLICO. So you see where that money went prior to 2015. And at section 22(1) of the Act, we're reminded the Act prohibits the Commission from making a loan or any grant except for the purposes of carrying on the functions of the Commission. Despite that, a grant of US $600,000 was made to the Irakrama International Center. Now, I'm a strong supporter of the Irakrama. I have visited several times, encourage my family when they come to go and visit. However, let's not talk about violating the law when you are doing it yourself. 1.36, the Commission's main operating bank account, was overdrawn by 90.2 million by the 31st of May 2015. And the interest was 489,204,000. That's what we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, I want to go also to this report that was tabled in this House, signed away, I think it's called. What a collection of, I won't say what it is. But I am going to ask the Parliament to share this information. The Honorable Minister on this side, Minister Rodriguez, came here and pontificated about the Global Witness Report. She stressed the C word. You know the C word, right? We can't say it, but you know. That's it, right. She stressed the C word. But what she did not do is state that Global Witness themselves withdrew their report, and that Forbes magazine did a story on the withdrawal of that report. So the information is here, and we may have forgotten our own Guyana Oil Now. Global Witness withdraws report on Guyana. It's right here. And then, from Global Witness, it said, statement on the withdrawal of the Global Witness report on Guyana's oil sector. Our February 2020 report on Guyana's oil sector, signed away, is not consistent with that focus. And for this reason, we've decided to remove it from our website and stop using it in our campaigning work. We regret any unintended negative consequences arising from this report. And then the assessment that Forbes magazine, the very reputable Forbes magazine, made on this, and let me quote, this is Forbes magazine. Yet on closer examination of the report, right, Forbes magazine, the allegations do not really stand up. Global Witness states repeatedly and unequivocally that it found no evidence of wrongdoing by ExxonMobil or any of the government ministers. Imagine that. And this is what Forbes magazine says. In the end, just a few hours of analysis reveals the Global Witness report for what it is: an ideologically motivated attack piece aimed at some of the biggest players in the oil and gas industry. And I will add the former government, right? Which, given the group's history, comes at no surprise at all. Mr. Speaker, we all know that mercury was contracted and Global Witness was just one of the many deliverables. And our vice president said publicly it was money well spent. Mr. Speaker, I would like to now look quickly at the area for which I was responsible as former Minister of Public Telecommunications. And I want to look at this because I listened in horror as the Minister of Amerindian Affairs came to this house, stood at this podium, and uttered a battery of untruths. Mr. Speaker, it was disingenuous at least and downright dishonest at worst to suggest that nothing was done in this sector under the last administration.
Honorable member, the dishonest to be withdrawn, but before I ask that you get an additional 5 minutes, you
you.
had,
Comrades, my apologies.
I said
Comrade-
before,
Comrades-
you had made a statement that the Honorable Minister Manning Chan had hired her relative at the Learning Channel. I would also need you to produce that evidence. Honorable Member, Mr. Jones?
Thank you. Comrade Chairman, I move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable Member, clock starts at 12:25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will withdraw that word and just say that the former minister was mendacious in her utterings when she stood at this program. Mr. Speaker, she spoke about finding a variety of tablets and batteries. Remember that? At a location in Diamond. And this is where I would like to submit also the audit of the one laptop per family project. And Mr. Speaker, item 7. Our procedures revealed that the management was unable to account for an additional 1,875 laptops costing $109 million plus, right? Laptops acquired by purchase or grant were a total of 55,145. Some 5,136 were either stolen or defective. The total cost was 1.6 million. And Mr. Speaker, lots of those were left in a location. And I have a feeling that that's the same location she's referring to. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to talk about training over 4,000 students, about creating over 170 ICT hubs, connecting ministries, setting up satellite VSAT dishes. I want to comment very quickly on a comment that the Minister of Finance made when he talked about the hinterland poor and remote ICT project languishing. That's the word, languishing. And believe it or not, that project, we signed the MOU and also their photographs online of the former Minister of Finance signing with Mikiko Tanaka, the former UN representative. We worked with Khadija Musa since 2016 when the ministry was created. So don't come and say nothing was done. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, what I want to say is that my presentation is not an indictment on what was done, but it really is a hope that we can search for common ground. Let us all understand how we're failing our people. Because, Mr. Speaker, an eye for an eye will just make us all blind. I could mention, of course, the fiber optic cable. And I just want to remind people of the figures. 13 billion wasted. Not a cent of this cable anywhere between Linden to Latham, managed by the son of a former president. Mr. Speaker, I will lay over that report too. Mr. Speaker, we have allowed race and politics to divide our country to our own detriment. And if we don't see that the world is watching on and laughing as our resources are depleted for the benefits of others, then these days of debates would be an exercise in futility, another wasted opportunity. Surely, Mr. Speaker, our ability to understand history, the challenges that hate and conflict bring to our country, should encourage us to be able to meet in a different way, encourage dialogue, and to come to some common ground. Mr. Speaker, we've all made mistakes in the past, and we understand the challenges any government may face in the search for lasting solutions. I am not here to put down the efforts to craft this budget. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, one of the rallying cries in this House has been the chance of rigged elections. And we maybe don't realize that perpetuates a stereotype that one ethnicity is responsible for the damage that was done to our electoral process, when we all know that it was an incompetent GCOM that failed to deliver on a good election, and up to today is not willing to examine its administrative processes. Mr. Speaker, these are the things that we must be honest enough and bold enough to have a conversation on. Mr. Speaker, I want to close with a quote from the Most Honorable Lee Kuan Yew. A nation is great, not by size alone. It is the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of its leaders, which will ensure it an honorable place in history. Mr. Speaker, we on this side look forward to creating and contributing.
Honorable Member, I see the Honorable Member Ms. Valda Lawrence on the floor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and sorry to interrupt the member. But I hear the honorable member and minister, what's his name?
Yes,
Forte,
the
Mr.
point of order.
McCoy, shouting out Mrs.
I
Maya's
don't,
name in this
I,
parliament,
Honorable
Mr.
Member, I
Speaker.
don't see
And
that
this
as a
is
point of
happening
order,
over and over
but I have
again
already,
with people who are not here.
I have already named the minister already. Honorable Member,
Sorry, can I just read the quote again? Huh? Yeah? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was closing, I'm urging that we can work together, and I wanted to end with this quote from Lee Kuan Yew. A nation is great not by its size alone. It is the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of its leaders, which ensure it an honorable place in history. Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the fence this side of this most honorable house are committed to helping to ensure that Guyana becomes the next Singapore in the Caribbean for the benefit, though, of all her citizens. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Guyana.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr.
And
Speaker, I'm kindly asking for the floor. I am
now
committed on-
for the Honorable Attorney
Speaker, I'm
General
kindly
and
asking
Minister of
for-
Legal Affairs, the Honorable Member, Mr. Anil Nandalal, and
This system has failed.
The election petition that you filed was thrown out. I will tell you about it. And that is what was important about the case. Mr. Speaker, the opportunity is now mine to offer a few remarks on the 2023 budget. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to begin by offering my warm congratulations to my venerable brother, the distinguished Minister of Finance and his industrious staff for preparing and presenting the third installment of our government's fiscal plan and developmental agenda for this financial year in the form of Budget 2023. Mr. Speaker, much to the incomprehension of those on the other side, the honorable members, Budget 2023 was not crafted in abstract. In the year 2020, the People's Progressive Party Civic went to the electorate with a 5-year development plan. We explained that plan to the electorate, and we asked the electorate that if they support that plan, then elect us to government and we will implement that plan. And elect us they did, Mr. Speaker, and we are implementing the third installment of that plan. Mr. Speaker, the manifesto that we went to the people with, I have it in my hand. And if I am only to look at the front page of that manifesto, it contains certain promises which we went to the electorate with. And I will, Mr. Speaker, just go through briefly as a report card in relation to those promises. The first one, removal of taxes on cell phone and data. We delivered that in 2021. 20,000 online scholarships. This is a 5-year promise. We delivered over half in 2.5 years. And we will pass the 20,000 mark this year. Mr. Speaker, reversal of 200 taxes and fees. Delivered, done. 40,000 per month in old age pension in our 3rd year. We are at $42,000. We are going to surpass this in the 5-year period. Reversal of VAT on electricity, water, food, and medical supplies, delivered. Restoration of electricity and water subsidies to pension, delivered. 50,000 because we care cash grant, we are at 40,000 in the 3rd year. Creation of 50,000 new jobs. We have put the sugar workers back. We have put the 2,000 CSOs back. We have put the 30,000 persons that you dismissed. And we have created thousands of jobs in the oil and gas sector and all the other sectors in the country. A plan to reduce crime, Mr. Speaker. I have here what the crime chief said, November the 17th, 2022. Crime chief says serious crime has dropped by 19% last year. And I have what the Commissioner of Police said in December the 17th, 2022. Cops record 30% decrease in serious crimes in Georgetown. Mr. Speaker, free education from nursery to university, it will be delivered in the 5-year period. 50,000 low-income house lots, we have already delivered 20,500, and we have 11 more thousand to deliver this year. So, Mr. Speaker, we don't operate in government in abstract. We have a plan as responsible leaders. This is what we agree with the electorate, and we are delivering in accordance with this manifesto. Mr. Speaker, what is worrying is the approach displayed by the honorable members on that side. Every speaker on our government presented cogent and compelling case. It means that you see nothing good in the budget. And that, Mr. Speaker, is worrying. But the irreconcilable difference.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on point of order.
Honorable Deputy.
Yes, I apologize to the Deputy Speaker. And for the remainder of my presentation, I exclude you, sir. Sir, the members on the other side have displayed the difference in philosophy. And it characterized their conduct in government. It is characterizing their conduct in their own political party, as I will demonstrate. And it is characterizing their conduct here. Mr. Speaker, we have crafted this budget in a sustainable way. Great references have been made to the oil wealth, and they would like for us to spend it all today. But that is not our philosophy. Our philosophy is to spend to make today better, but to make tomorrow greater. And that is the philosophy that guides this budget. Mr. Speaker, those on the other side prefers instant gratification. Our budget team, it says it reflects our philosophy. Improving lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow. The other side would prefer the budget team to read, spend all today, and to hell with tomorrow. That is the philosophy. And Mr. Speaker, unwittingly, it came out yesterday afternoon in the presentation of the honorable member from region number 8, Mr. Richard Sinclair. Honorable member, what he did yesterday was a very revealing thing. He used the total population and divided it by the value of the budget, and he boldly declared that every citizen in Guyana should get over $1 million. Forget the developmental plan, just share out the whole budget. That is the philosophy, Mr. Speaker. That is the philosophy. Mr. Speaker, no, don't build anything. Let us spend, and let us spend. Mr. Speaker, it is the same. The Vice President said last week, that the big picture of budget 2023 is lost on the opposition. Well, the Vice President was wrong. Every picture is lost on the opposition. They're coming up blank, 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 like the 30 blank checks. And they will tell us, Mr. Speaker, that that's PNC business. But let me tell you what is important. As long as you pose and present yourself, unfortunately, as the alternative government. PNC business is the public business. And that type of conduct, signing of 30 blank checks, characterized and typified your performance in government.
Has no place in government.
And has no place in good governance and accountability.
No place.
I had, like most of you, I had the benefit of listening to that recorded telephone conversation, and I heard the treasurer, the poor fellow was complaining. He said, my God, I've never signed my name so much. I forget how to sign my name. And one honorable member from the front bench, I heard his voice distinctly. All he could say is, wow, 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 wow. I thought I was listening to a siren. After a time, I thought I was listening to a siren.
And what was my...
It was one wow per check, 30 wows. And you come to lecture us here on good governance, and that is what you're doing in your own party?
What did Mahipal say?
Mahipal said we have to take it to the leadership. Mahipal was smart enough to record the conversation.
Honorable AG Mahipal is somebody outside of the house? Oh, okay.
Most honorable member. In fact, I have to give him credit. He was very honorable in that conversation. Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
So when they come here to talk about accountability, the people of Guyana must be reminded. Because as I said, it typified their conduct in government. That is why they saw nothing wrong in giving a contract to rent a building in Almoyston, a house, for $12 million to a friend, throwing the procurement process aside. Mr. Speaker, the gentleman bought the house for $20 million, and he received 3 months rent in advance, $36 million, before the tenancy commenced. That is how they dealt with public monies. It is a philosophy, Mr. Speaker. It is a philosophy. And let us take incompetence. They have come here, yes, tenant of the last speaker. You heard all the high-sounding notes from the last speaker, but we didn't hear about the tenancy. But Mr. Speaker, they came here and they lectured us about incompetence. I can't speak to every minister. I can't speak to every minister between 2015 to 2020. But let us deal with the Attorney General that they imposed upon us. Let us deal with him. That was a gentleman whose incompetence was unparalleled in any part of planet Earth. Mr. Speaker, imagine he was supposed to be the legal advisor to the government, and within the first year, the government had to end up hiring 6 legal advisors for him. And you are coming here to tell us about incompetence? Mr. Speaker, again, it reflects a mindset. You had a president who felt that he was above the law, and his Attorney General said that to the court. And I'm going to give you examples. When President Granger revoked the Red House lease unlawfully, his Attorney General went to the court and says the president is above the law.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable
I rise on
Holder.
Standing Order 41, content of speech. Forty-one, 41.7, the President's name shall not be used to influence the Assembly. I submit to you that the Honorable Member is using...
Hold 1 minute, 1 second, AG.
That is the philosophy I'm talking about. They don't.
Thank you. Honorable Member Mr. Holder, I think that standing order refers to the sitting president.
Obviously, Mr. Speaker.
So I cannot uphold the point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I can recall in your previous rulings that if he's not here to defend himself, then the honorable member should not be mentioning his name.
Yeah. But we're talking about the policies.
I'm talking
understand.
about track record in government, which I must be able to say. I must be able to talk about that in a budget debate.
And Honorable AG, you must allow me to rule
Yes, of
and
course,
then
sir.
give you the floor. Okay, you may continue now, Honorable.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I was speaking about a philosophy that was reflected in policy and behavior on that side. And the president at the time felt that he was above the law. So he unlawfully rescinded a 50-year-old lease for the Red House. And his attorney general went to the court and said that the president is above the law, that he can't be sued. He's not answerable to any court. The court overruled him. He did not learn. The president then rescinded 50 rice farmers' leases at MMA. He went to the court again and he argued that the president is above the law. The court overruled him. He did not learn. The president unlawfully appointed James Patterson to head GCOM. And he went to the court again and he said that the president is above the law, and the court overruled him. And Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, he did not learn still. Only this week, he went to the CCJ and he told them that he's above the law, and they chased him out. Look at this. No one is above.
Yeah, but Honorable AG, I don't think the CCJ chased anybody out. I think you could use better language.
The CCJ summarily disposed of him by reaffirming that no one is above the law. The CCJ tell Basil Williams before dismissing his application. The people must know the level of incompetence that this nation had to endure. And then you on that side coming here to lecture us about competence in government. Mr. Speaker, and rightfully so, I must give you credit. You saw the disaster that he was and you replaced him. But you replaced him with Honorable Member Ford. And your fortunes have not fared better. Mr. Speaker, I can't go through case by case, but let us take the two most important cases. That is their two elections petition. Mr. Speaker, when they filed the petition, Mr. Ford boldly held a press conference in front of the High Court. And he told the nation that by these two petitions, the PPP will be removed from office in 6 months. Well, Mr. Speaker, in 6 months, both of his petitions were dismissed, and the PPP is here 2.5 years later, stronger and better than ever. Mr. Speaker, they are telling us about incompetence. Mr. Speaker, the honorable members on that side have once again resumed that discredited narrative of accusing this government of extrajudicial killing. The honorable member Coretta MacDonald stood there at that podium and alleged that the families of the Henry boys, of Harish Singh, of Quindon Bacchus, and Orrin Boston are still waiting for justice. And you hear the echo, yes. It is the philosophy, Mr. Speaker. What the honorable member has omitted to tell the House is that 2 persons have been charged and committed for murder for the Henry boys. A preliminary inquiry was held and they were committed to the High Court. 4 persons were charged for the death of Harish Singh, and they did a PI and they have been committed to stand trial. 3 officers have already been charged after an independent investigation was done by the Police Complaints Authority in relation to the death of Quinton Bacchus, and the cases are going on in the court. A SWAT constable was charged with manslaughter in relation to Orrin Boston. And Mr. Speaker, they would come here and they would create that subtle racial message that the PPP government is unleashing a police force against them. That is the subtle message of racism. And Mr. Speaker, we know what they caused as a result of some of these killings. The violence on the roadways of West Coast Maurice, the robbery, the vandalism, the arson, the destruction of properties. And on the east coast of Demerara, the robbery of hundreds and the destruction of properties going into the millions is as a result of some of these deaths. Mr. Speaker, I consulted with the police force and I got the statistics and I will share it with the Parliament that between 2015 to 2020, before August, 41 persons died in police custody or at the hands of the police, almost 8 per year while you were in government. We never alleged extrajudicial killing. We never put people on the road. We never encouraged people to beat, burn, and rob. That's the difference in political leadership.
That's the difference.
Mr. Speaker, I can speak personally to 2 of these victims. Lal Bachan, he died at Sadi Lockup on June the 31st, 2019. And Kali Charan Sewat, he died at Sparandam Lockup on January 28, 2019. Instead of alleging extrajudicial killing, instead of playing politics with the death and tragedies of these people, we instituted legal proceedings on behalf of their family, and we won millions of dollars of compensation against them. For them, that is the difference in leadership, Mr. Speaker. That is the difference in leadership. Mr. Speaker, I can continue, but let me move quickly to the legal sector. Mr. Speaker, this year is going to be a watershed year for many projects in the judicial and legal sector. And I'll begin with the establishment of a law school on these shores, a regional legal educational institution. Mr. Speaker, and it has some history. And thanks, Minister of Finance. Let me resuscitate and remind the honorable members. Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, where are we going to tell you who vision it was? One day in 2017, we heard big press statement that the Council of Legal Education granted permission for the establishment of a law school. Big spread in the newspapers. And then, Mr. Speaker, an agreement was signed by an unknown university to partner the government of Guyana. Look, the Attorney General well attired in his suit. You can't stop them for pomp and pageantry. They had a signing, and it was obviously front page in the newspapers. Signed an agreement, they got permission. Mr. Speaker, it didn't stop there. It did not stop there. 15 acres of land was identified at the University of Guyana. A sod was turned. Pomp and ceremony.
Pageantry.
They did an image, an artist image of the law school. Look at here.
Where is it?
I have it here. Artist image.
Pomp and pageantry.
They give it a name. The JOF.
All their
The JOF Haynes Law School. They give it a name. And then lo and behold, a public statement was issued by the Council of Legal Education that they never gave permission for the establishment of a law school in Guyana.
no.
Mr. Speaker, we could understand the Attorney General claiming that he's losing cases, he's losing case files, he's losing law books. Blame me for it. But how do you lose a whole law school? How do you lose a whole law school? And they are telling us about incompetence. Mr. Speaker, fortunately last year, September, permission was granted by the Council of Legal Education, the proper authority, for us to begin work on the establishment of a law school here. And Mr. Speaker, the government has established a team, And that team will be working with the judiciary, with the University of Guyana, with the Guyana Bar Association towards the attainment of this objective. So, Mr. Speaker, we are doing things the proper way, not the way that they used to do it. Mr. Speaker, this year also, the important commission to reform our constitution will be established. Last year, we passed the Constitutional Reform Commission Act, and this year we'll see the establishment of the constitutional reform, and we hope that the opposition will come on board and cooperate with this process, because after all, they promised, as we did, that we will deliver to the people constitutional reform. They have failed abysmally before, and we hope that they will not fail the people again. Mr. Speaker, this year also, well, last year, we inducted a batch of special prosecutors comprising of LLB students whom we specially trained at the University of Guyana in a very innovative initiative where we had the Chief Justice lecturing, the Director of Public Prosecutions lecturing, and visiting legal luminaries from across the Caribbean lecturing in a specially comprised program to equip these Bachelor of Laws holders with the necessary skill set to put them alongside the police prosecutors in the magistrates' court. Mr. Speaker, we graduated from that program 35 special prosecutors who are currently in the magistrates' court in our country in regions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. Mr. Speaker, another batch of 35 will begin training within a month's time, and once they graduate, they will also be unleashed in the courts of our country, giving priority to the courts that we have not yet covered. Mr. Speaker, last year we implemented the Restorative Justice Act, and this year we are going to establish a Restorative Justice Center and a secretariat that will bring the act into fruition. Mr. Speaker, it will be recalled that in this legislation, the focus is against custodial sentence, and the focus is on the exploration of other forms of punishment, but in particular, it brings the victim and the perpetrator of the crime together and try to repair and restore the relationship and have them work out their own form of punishment, for want of a better word. And significantly, it goes into the society itself, trying to find the root cause of the criminal conduct and working to address it. It's a very important social reform in our country that will take root in the criminal justice system during the course of 2023. And of course, it is directed to non-violent offenses only. Mr. Speaker, this year we are going to complete a massive building at Saudi Essequibo Coast that will provide accommodation for officers of the Director of Public Prosecutions Office, an office as well as living quarters, so they are comfortably placed when they are executing their task on the Essequibo Coast. This year also, 2 edifices will be constructed, one at Luzicnan on the east coast of Demerara and one at Virginujan East Bank, Essequibo, which will accommodate a Hope and Justice Center, or 2 Hope and Justice Centers. These institutions, Mr. Speaker, will provide legal, medical, and probationary services to the victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, child abuse, etc. Accommodation will be provided for the victims so as to remove them from the source of the violence if necessary. Mr. Speaker, under this program, we will draft a bill to abolish preliminary inquiries in criminal proceedings in Guyana. Every day or so often we read in the newspapers the complaint about delay in the criminal justice system and the length of time that accused persons are languishing in prison. Well, part of that reason is because currently the law requires a preliminary inquiry to be done to establish a prima facie case before going to a judge and jury. Right across the Caribbean and even beyond in the Commonwealth, that one tier or first tier of the criminal process or the criminal trial process has been abolished. And you now review the statements and a magistrate can determine whether to commit or not. We are moving in that direction, removing that tier out of the criminal trial process and accelerating the trial. That will result in the elimination of tremendous backlog, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the heat is on. Mr. Speaker, this year also, we will have a review of the Plea Bargaining Agreement Act. Some years ago, we introduced in a statutory form plea bargaining. Plea bargaining simply means the meeting of the prosecutor and the accused persons once certain safeguards are in place, and for them to negotiate and work out a settlement or a reduction of sentence that is acceptable to the fundamental principles of justice. So that people don't go there and get excessive sentences, or they don't detain the court process unduly. Neither should they get a slap on the wrist for offenses that might offend the moral values of our society. Unfortunately, this mechanism has not worked in the manner that we contemplated. And with the input, with the help of the Director of Public Prosecutions, I have commissioned a review of this bill to inquire into why it has not worked, and let us address those concerns so that we can get it to work. And it will also bring greater expediency to the administration of criminal justice. Mr. Speaker, we will also be working with Guyana Prison Service in retrofitting the mental health unit at Lusignan prisons and training prison officers and related personnel in mental health. We will also upgrade computer labs in 4 prison centers across Guyana in providing computer hardware and accessories for prison centers at New Amsterdam, Lusignan, Timeri, and Mazaruni. Mr. Speaker, we will also support the Drug Treatment Court of Guyana by the procurement of computer hardware, accessories, and the provision of one 5-seater 4x4 vehicle. Mr. Speaker, in the area of the Deeds and Commercial Registry Authority, with our ever-expanding commercial sector, obviously, this is an important state department that must be targeted for expansion. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Minister, as you noted, the heat is on. You'll need an extension.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask that the honorable member be granted an extension to conclude his presentation?
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Minister, you have 5 minutes, and I could bear the heat.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we started the construction of a building at Sadi on the Essequibo coast, a 3-story building at a cost of $480 million that will house the Deeds and Commercial Registry Authority operations there. And in this budget, there's an $800 million allocation for the construction of a new building across the road from the New Amsterdam High Court that will house the operation of this important entity. Mr. Speaker, let me go straight to the judiciary, because the judicial sector has some very important projects. Mr. Speaker, continuing from last year in the Northwest Magisterial District, we will be completing the Magistrate Court and Living Quarter at Port Kaituma, Region 1. Also, we will be completing the Magistrates Court and Living Quarter at Mabaruma, Region 1. We will be completing the Magistrate Court and Living Quarters at Vigilance on the east coast of Demerara. The expansion to the Court of Appeal building will be completed. Essequibo Magisterial District will see the completion of the Bartica Magistrate Court Phase 2. Essequibo Magisterial District will see the completion of Madhya Magistrate Court Phase 2. East Coast Demerara Magisterial District will see Coven John Magistrates Court being completed, and Maikoni Magistrates Court as well. We, Mr. Speaker, Work will be done also in extending the living quarters at Lethem Magistrates Court. Mr. Speaker, extension will be done also at the Diamond Grove Magistrates Court to erect a storage bond at that location. The West Demerara Magisterial Court at Wales will be retrofitted, and a library and research center is going to be constructed. Mr. Speaker, elevators are going to be installed at the High Court in Berbice, Demerara, and Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, for 2023, new courts will be constructed with living quarters at Timeri. Mr. Speaker, a new court and living quarters will be constructed at Friendship on the east bank of Demerara, and that is along the intended new highway. In Essequibo Magisterial District, we will construct a new magistrate court and living quarters along with an access bridge at Anna Regina. Many members may know that the court is currently in a police station. For the first time, it will get its own home. Madhya Magistrate Court Phase 3 will be completed. At Parfait Harmony, we are building a magistrate court and living quarters. Mr. Speaker, Bartica Magistrates Court will be completed as well, and the construction of a martial bond and document center at the Georgetown Magistrates Court. Mr. Speaker, I move quickly to our legislative agenda. As usual, we have a very aggressive legislative agenda for the year 2023. And if I can run through them quickly. The Summary Jurisdiction Offences Amendment Bill, the Companies Amendment Bill, the Landlord and Tenant Amendment Bill, the Evidence Amendment Bill, the Summary Jurisdiction Procedure Amendment Bill, the Court of Appeal Amendment Bill, the Extramural Work Amendment Bill, the Limitation Amendment Bill, the Criminal Law Procedure Amendment Bill, the Planning and Development Single Window System Bill, which is already in the Parliament, the Radiation Safety and Security Bill already here, Combating of Trafficking in Person Bill, Border Patrol Bill, Firearms Control Bill, Apostille Bill, Leave With Pay Amendment Bill, Electronic Communication and Transaction Bill, Anti-Dumping Bill, Engineers Bill, Securities Bill, Recording of Court Proceeding Bill, Foreign Judgment Reciprocal Enforcement Bill, Business Name Registration Bill, Gambling Prevention Amendment Bill, Rice Farmer Security of Tenure Amendment Bill, Data Protection Bill, Health Information System Bill, Real Estate Bill, Food and Drug Bill, Gaming Bill, Criminal Law Procedure Pre-Bargaining and Pre-Arrangement Bill, Paper Committal Bill, Petroleum Production Bill, Electronic Case Management System Bill, National Intelligence and Security Bill, Surveillance Devices Bill, Arbitration Bill, Public Health Bill, Solid Waste Management Bill, Family Violence Bill, Subsidies and Countervailing Measures Bill, Safeguard Measures Bill, Social Workers Licensing Bill, Corporate Tax Amendment Bill, Caribbean Community Amendment Bill, Sexual Offences Bill, and Mr. Speaker, there are a series of legislation that we are required to bring in conformity with our international obligations. Also, before I close, Mr. Speaker, this year, myself and my brother, the distinguished Minister of Finance, will lead Guyana's efforts in preparing Guyana's financial structure for mutual assessment at the level of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. That will require us to pass a whole set of new bills, regulations, and and also bring together all the relevant players and prepare them for that assessment. Before the Cabinet of Guyana is our national plan for the year 2023 to prepare us for that very rigorous and important exercise. So, Mr. Speaker, I spent this time in my budget to outline the level of work that we have to do in Guyana in establishing that important legal framework that will cradle the developmental agenda of our country. And Mr. Speaker, I again appeal to the other side. I heard the empty words of the Honorable Member Cathy Hughes about they're on board. But Mr. Speaker, yes, it is empty because I listened. I listened to the presentation. What the honorable member said that at the end, after objecting to us building a hospitality center at Port Morant and building a track at Leonora, Mr. Speaker, I understand the undercurrents of those objections are not lost on the Guyanese people. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to build a united country. And we have to diversify development across all sectors of this country and across geographic regions. We will not develop one region in our country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I lend my 100% support to Budget 2023. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. Before we take the suspension for lunch, we have had many times before, I've had to deal with the criticism of the rulings of the Speaker by members outside of the House. And as we were listening to the presentation, the Honorable Chief Whip from the opposition was at it again. I'm trying my best to ensure that we keep fairness between the two sides in the presentation of their speeches. Yes, I allowed one particular phrase from one minister and from the other side too. And when it started to become abusive, I stopped it for all sides. If that is biasness, I accept biasness. We now take the suspension for lunch for 1 hour.